Hi everyone, I'm Laura.
I'm Steph.
And welcome in the Sister Circle podcast.
Welcome to episode 3.
The circle where as women we share,
Learn,
grow,
heal,
and thrive. Today it's our third episode of a really first series, The Power of Healing Stories. And yeah, we're super excited. But before we start, I would like to make an acknowledgement of the traditional owner of the Gadigal country on where we are currently recording. And acknowledge as well the people of the Eora Nation from this country, and would like to pay my respect to their elders, past and present, as well as emerging leaders.
So excited. We've got a special guest today. Trish, hi.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to the Sister Circle. It's such an honor to have an elder from the Indigenous community. Would you like to introduce yourself and your people, where you're from, for our listeners today?
Yama. Welcome.
Oh,
In my language.
Oh, Yama. And
which language is that?
That's the 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 people.
oh,
So that means Yama in the Kamilaroi Nation as well. It extends across our Kamilaroi Nation, which is the second biggest nation in Australia.
oh, really?
Yes, so that's where I'm from, in northwestern New South Wales. My name is Patricia 𝗧𝗜𝗘𝗢, but the kids call me Aunty Trish.
Auntie.
So, out of respect, I think we get that from the kids start calling us aunties and
Auntie.
uncles.
Yeah.
So that's a sign of respect. So
To be
kids would
honest.
call me Aunty Trish. My traditional name is 𝗓𝗓𝗘𝗢.
Okay. And does that have a meaning?
No, it has a meaning, but special to me, so I don't like to.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, I'm from far north-western New South Wales, desert country. My family lives along the Barker, the river. So that's the longest river in Australia. So from Walgett, which is my mum's country, down to 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, to Bourke, to 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, and right down to Menindee. So, so that's where I'm from.
And Trish, what's your life work? I know that you said you look after your grandkids now, but
That's my life's work.
Yeah.
I don't do anything other than just rearing my children and
Yeah.
my grandchildren. So, that's my cultural role. So that's what
Okay.
I do.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we wanted to have an elder from an Indigenous community just to share with us some of the tradition that is still practiced today on the land that we live in. I know that when we're so immersed in these Western traditions that we get lost. Even when you said about the auntie thing, in our culture, we do call elder people aunties, but we're just and all of that can get lost in the Western tradition. So thank you for that reminder. And I
So
think
do you want us to call you Aunty Trish today?
You can call me Aunty Trish.
we're more than happy to do
and
that.
to me, an elder is not a person's age. To me, an elder is a knowledge holder. So how much knowledge you hold.
Oh wow!
So that's where we get where we see it as our elders.
Yes.
And would you say that you're an elder in your community?
Well, I think that's got to come back to the young kids, and if they acknowledge me and they call me auntie, well, then I know. Then I know that respect's there.
So you mean it's elected almost?
Yes.
Okay.
And seeing through the eyes of a young kids and the generation, and you'll see a lot of that when I go back home. They will call me auntie, so I see that as a respect for myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Living in a place called 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, where you've got the oldest sacred site, which is the Biami's Nunu, which is the fish traps, where all the tribes would come and meet, and they would catch fish 2 or 3 times a year. So that's where I lived all my life, and on a mission. So I've got to go back to my story of where my family first originated from. A station called Dungalea Station, which is in between Lightning Ridge and Walgett. So that's where my family came from. 5 generations. My grandmother's name was Bayendra, great-great-grandmother. And then my great-grandmother was named 𝗓𝗓𝗘𝗢, so I've taken on her name. So I believe that's my role. What she did is what I see myself doing.
Okay.
And that's just looking after, the kids, and as we've just talked about, that kinship role.
Yeah.
Of looking after, the kids when, if mums are gone or absent or pass on, then we automatically, myself and my daughters, take on that role of bringing up, the grandkids.
Could you introduce the concept of kinship for the auditors that wouldn't know?
Kinship is like me growing up. I never had my mum, so my grandmother automatically took that role and took me and looked after me all my life. So kind of to me, that's the kinship role of. Then when my mum left me at probably 2 weeks old, then my grandmother came in and said, I'll be taking that role and responsibility.
Right.
So I learned a lot of that from my grandmother.
Wow.
Yeah.
I learned that in the Indigenous communities, it's mostly a matriarch community.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And
yes.
How does that translate in?
Well, you get matriarchal or you get patriarchal. Some have, the patriarchal, the male line, and most of us down in New South Wales, well, that's what they call it, and we have the matriarchal roles mainly.
Oh, okay, so it's
certain parts of Australia will have the patriarchal.
Okay.
But where I come from is the matriarchal lines.
And what are the role of the woman then?
Oh, she takes on a lot of roles. Probably the birthing. Back in those days, you never had no hospital, so the mothers would have their babies under the trees. What they call a birthing tree. So back home on country, we know, my grandmother was born under a birthing tree, and she would, they'd have their babies. They would, with the placenta, they would sometimes bury him, or sometimes they would carry him for miles. Some people do. They eat them.
Oh.
Because it puts back into the body. What's been taken out. I know a lot of people say, that sounds a bit, far-fetched, but it had its reasons that people would eat their own placentas, and some would bury it under a tree, and that tree was sacred to where that person was and where that person was born. And our women back in the day would walk for miles and miles. So live long. My grandmother lived at 108.
Okay.
And that's from walking?
And that's from walking, just from eating off the land, the traditional foods that they would eat. And there's so much of it still there and so much of it out there. You have your medicinal use, you have your, people would walk for miles, and yet my grandmother would walk and know where water was. So, back then in those days, it wasn't a worry. Now, you just get it all destroyed now. Our land's been destroyed in a lot of ways, our waterways especially. See, within our culture, there's no one's higher than the other. We have a men's business and we have the women's business. And, that's on the same playing surface, where the men would go and hunt, the emu, the kangaroo, the meat, they would go out and do that. And then the women would go out and get the berries and the fruits and the nuts and the gum. We have the special gum that grows on the trees. So, everyone had their part to play.
So the men and the women business, when you talk about it in community, it's just allocated roles.
Yes, they are allocated.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
most certainly.
Yeah. And how does and what's the benefit of allocating roles?
Oh, there's a lot of benefits of it. Health benefits for sure, and when the women would go out, they would take the young girls, because they got to be taught too as well. So it's like it's passed down. It's knowledge passed on. You got to teach the young girls their roles too and their responsibilities. So they have roles. Everyone has a role to play, no matter how young or old you are.
So talk more about law.
Depends. Men have their law, women have their law.
Without giving us too much information about this, the sacredness of the law, What can you tell us about the significance?
My husband is from the Murawarri people. I'm 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗓 people, which are neighbouring tribes. And that's only like an hour and a half away from one another by car. But that in walking probably take you a day or two. But our laws are different. We speak differently. That tribe eats certain foods. Some eat the emu, some don't. Which we call 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 in the language. And then we have our totem system. They have a totem, I have a totem. So we're not allowed to eat that. We have to look after that. So there are just some of the roles of law that we take on.
So would you say that the law are the rules that regulate the community?
Yes, we do.
And they touch everything? Like, is there like you mentioned the food, you mentioned the language, but like, is there any other things like, who we can marry, who we can...
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Back in the day, we would be the ones, or our grandparents would be the ones who would choose our partners for us. So they would see the skill on your husband, who's going to become your husband, and that has to match up with the skill of the female and the male, and that comes together, and that's where you get your children, and how you get your skillful. Your children become skillful.
So are you matched by your skills?
Yes, by skill.
What? This needs to be introduced in these dating apps.
But yes, that's how they did it.
So your skills complement.
Yes, give us back the responsibility so that we can do that.
Oh my God. And would you say that your children, they just acquiesce to that? They accept you choosing, or would you say that you've seen that change?
That's changed over the years now.
Yeah.
So, yes, I've seen that change. But for me personally, yes, I've seen that change. And then I've got my grandchildren now that are just have both parents as Aboriginal parents. A lot of that I'm strict on too as well. So I'd love for my children to marry their own kind, which is your own people.
And tell us why, just in case people.
Oh well, it's all to do with the bloodline.
Tell me more.
It's important that bloodline is kept pure. That if you you can't marry your cousins, you can't marry within your nations. You got to marry from from another nation that's not because most of them are your relatives.
Yeah.
And you can't marry your own bloodline because then something goes wrong with your children. So it's important that we get it right, and we only have one chance at getting that right, so we need to get it right the first time.
Excellent.
Yes.
Good. And what would you say you've benefited from your just the tradition, the stories that you've heard from your grandmother and the other women, the other elders that you grew up around?
My grandmother, my mother-in-law. When my grandmother passed away, then I had my mother-in-law. She was an amazing woman. She taught me so much. She taught me a lot about traditional bread making, which is what me and my son do now. We do traditional bread making. We go around the city and we teach the kids now about us being the oldest bread makers in the world, which we would. The women would go out and, get the kangaroo grass and they would dry it out and grind it down into when it becomes seeds, and they would grind it down and make bread. So we're talking about a long, long time ago of making bread. So we become the oldest bread makers in the world. And so now I try to introduce that back to our children and say, be proud of, being the oldest bread makers in the world. So that's what we do now. And that's what I take away from a lot of what my mother-in-law taught me. She was an amazing woman, and my grandmother taught me a lot, Aunting, traditional, gatherings where we would go out and gather, the nuts and the berries and the fruits and, which season, what's in season, what's out of season. We get excited when, the quandongs start growing. It's around Serica's birthday, my daughter, so we get really excited, don't we? Oh, everybody's at home gets excited. Oh, it's quandong season coming up. We've got to get out and, get some. It's the most amazing fruit you'll ever taste.
Wow. So So from what I'm getting from what you're saying about your tradition is that the importance of this women business being nurtured by the women in your community, that be it your grandmother or even continues to your mother-in-law, even teaching you these things to nurture yourself. It helps you to look after yourself, to look after your family, as the role that you have for as the matriarch of your family. You learn how to feed your family, how to look after it, and then you pass the teaching on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
A lot of that's been passed on, yes.
Yeah. So basically, you're just following the law of nature.
Exactly. Yes.
Basically, that's what it is. So
Yes.
whatever your environment that you occupied requires, that is what you follow. That's what you eat, and that's what So yeah.
And is it a practice that is still in use there now that we, like,
Most
you
certainly.
mentioned yourself, like the land is destroyed, like people are living in like a really urban environment. Do you still like sustain on?
We still sustain because we live on 100 kilometres north of Burke in a little community called 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢. That's where my husband's from. So where my husband goes, I go. So now I'm a part of that, his tribe now, because I'm married in. I've married into that family.
This
And
is
so-
going to make a very interesting conversation afterwards, because there's been some difference of opinion when it comes to where your husband go, you follow. But from what I'm getting from you, Aunty Trish, is that you've explained today that the women and men in your tradition have allocated roles, and those roles are observed quite religiously because
Well, it's kind of like a religion to us.
yeah
It's our religion.
and the benefits of that it preserves some of your traditions and your God. And it is not just your tradition for the sake of tradition. This is from my understanding. But it also helps in keeping you healthy, in keeping you guys healthy. And it's interesting. In observing where my husband goes, I go.
Yes, that's exactly right. Where he goes, I go.
And is it part of the law?
Yes, it is part of law. Yeah, for some people, I can't speak for other people's nations, because that's their law. I've got to respect that. But for me, my law is I follow my husband. So once we're married, and then I follow his law, and then his mum teach me. But she's passed on. When my grandmother passed on, then my husband took me to 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢 and lived there, and then my mother-in-law became my teacher.
Yeah.
And taught me and showed me how to cook traditional bread, taught me how to cook up the meat, the emu and the kangaroo when the men would bring it home from hunting. And we still do a lot of that practice today. We still live off our traditional foods because we're 100 kilometres away from the nearest shop, which is, I'm happy about that. I'm glad we're not near shops, Coles, Woolies. Well, we don't get it out our way, but,
Yeah.
So it's fascinating because like what you just say is that it never stopped. Like it's not okay, you're 18, then you graduated. No, like you're
exactly. It doesn't stop.
Like it's like you said it yourself. You're married, then your mother-in-law pass you on those those tradition, and then like probably like as an adult woman you learn about all of that, and that just made me think about a question that I have, like about what could happen in a woman's life, adult woman's life. For example, that divorcing from a husband, or losing a child. Like, does it like, or do the woman business gonna take care of those type of events and support women?
Yes, I'll tell you a story about my husband's mum. She told me a story. She sat me down one day and told me her story, how she met her husband. She was a Budgety woman, he was a Murawarri man, and how she would walk to meet him with her two other sisters, and the three brothers and the three sisters married one another. So the three women would do the walking to meet the men. So it would take her from here to Canberra. And you know how far Canberra's away? It's a fair way, so it'll take them...
By foot?
Yeah, by foot. So it would take like good 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Oh, they must have had a good conversation.
Would you do that for love? Would you walk that far for your husband?
I don't think so. I don't even want to go to Parramatta.
I can take a flight.
I don't even want to go to Parramatta.
But that's what they would do back in the day. They knew where to get food. They knew where water was. They would walk for miles, miles on, and that's why they lived to the ages of past 100 years of age, because of it took a lot of skill to be able to walk the country and know, where water holes were, to look for duck eggs, things like that survived on as they were walking along. But just imagine the bond between 3 sisters, and the anxiousness of meeting the 3 brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, that just blows my mind.
But from what you're saying, the benefits of that is that they're married into the same family, so they're not separated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and I'd say marriage is a duty.
Okay. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a duty. We don't, believe in, as they say in the Western constructs, divorce.
Yeah.
But we'd be there for the hard times and the good times.
So you don't have divorce in your community?
Well,
No,
within our law we wouldn't have. But now, because of Western interference, we all got to go by the Western. Even though we don't need to, the Western constructs. But law, we wouldn't have had time for. We'd have kept ourselves busy. We'd have been out on country. Would have been no interference, nothing to worry about. So, but a lot of those marriages lasted a very long time.
So then, how would you remedy a violent situation, or I don't know, whatever reason? What's the other reason apart from I just don't want to be married anymore? I can see how you guys might see that as breaking the family, but what about if it is an actual dangerous situation for either one, the woman or the man?
We've set up our law enforcement. We've got our own law enforcement, our law within our nation. My son set up the law enforcement, so that this is the way we would deal with domestic violence. Because you're not allowed to, through law, not allowed to marry that person from the same nation. So what we would do, we would always have a male and a female on call, ready to deal with the domestic violence situation, where we would say to, because as I said back then, that the female would follow the male to their nation. So what we would do is we'd send the female home to their nation to be able to have a time out.
Okay.
And then we would leave, the men would deal with the male.
And who would take those decisions? The law
enforcement would do it, yes.
And
the law men and women, as we would say, law men and women.
Okay, so and are they elders in the community? Are they, who are they?
Oh, they're the elders.
Okay.
So mainly my husband's brothers.
Okay.
So, a lot of them, and this is another, we don't speak to the men. All us women just speak with one another. We don't speak with the men. All the women would do all the talking amongst one another to relay that back to the, and how we.
So would it be like a spokesperson?
Yes.
Who would relay that?
Yes.
Whatever you speak amongst you women, there's a spokesperson who goes back. How do you make sure that is a fair assessment? How do you make sure that whoever is who is relaying the information doesn't have a bias? Maybe, because you see it sometimes, they might be really fond of that man or whatever. How do you make sure that it's fair?
Yeah, there's someone who's got some more experience in life and stuff. People who've got that knowledge, as I said, that knowledge older.
Okay.
And how to be able to deal with those kind of situations. But, that's how we would deal with the domestic violence. Yes. And we want to try and intervene with that before we have, the LAW, law enforcement, come and, be able to, come and arrest our people. So we have solutions. We have a lot of solutions, but they got to give us back so we can control the way we do law.
And how does it work with, so you, from what I'm hearing, guided by nature, eldest woman take their woman like to teach them about like like how to thrive in life or to like become the role that they need to be in the community. And is that close to a specific type of woman? Like, do we like if it's women, like from what I heard, if it's women from other community, you mentioned that this is fine, we can have those cross
Yep.
knowledge sharing.
Yes.
But for example, something that we were like when we were exploring like our circle, our sister circle, we thought about like trans women, we thought about even like every type of woman, like that are not like the as per cisgender. And then we were just wondering like how this is reflected in
Yeah, because I know of that they are they call it the sister girls
Yes.
in some countries. So there is a branch of womanhood who are the sister girls. Do they become part of are they part of the women the women's business?
Well, they got to be because they are the bloodline.
Okay.
And we can't deny who's a bloodline.
Right.
Okay.
You know, so we love them, whoever they may be or whatever they may be.
Right.
But they are the bloodline.
But is there a difference? Do you make any distinction between them and cis-born women?
No, I don't.
Wow.
I see them on the same level as I see everybody.
Here we
wow.
go.
Should I introduce myself real quick?
Yeah.
Please.
So my name's 𝗧𝗘𝗘𝗢. I'm a 𝗩𝗜𝗓𝗓𝗓 and Murawarri woman, a Wadji woman. And the reason why I have 4 nations is because 2 of my nations are from my mum, which is 𝗩𝗓𝗓𝗓 and 𝗩𝗓𝗓, and 2 are from my dad, which is 𝗏𝗏𝗓𝗓 Murawarri. So I'm a social worker. I work with Aboriginal youngsters that are experiencing homelessness. And at the moment I run a youth refuge in the inner west of Sydney. And the reason why I wanted to chime in is because I work with a number of Aboriginal youngsters that are with the queer community, and I identify with the queer community as well. And I've grown up pretty privileged because I have 2 amazing parents that have accepted me for who I am, and I just want to share that experience with the other youngsters that I work with as well. But I wanted to chime in because there was a question in relation to trans women, and so I actually have a number of youngsters that identify that there has been a complication when it comes to identifying as a trans woman in community, and that the elders have agreed that they have had to identify with one or the other genders, and that they've happily identified as being a trans woman, and once they've made that distinction, that they've been more than happy to be a part of that community, and they've been welcomed into women's circles. So I think once that distinction is made and that young person makes that decision, it is widely accepted in community, and that's something that we've had to adapt with over time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's new?
It's new, yeah.
But still, when you said that, you mean that there has to be a distinction, meaning that the non-binary is still not like accepted for now.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that. Because at the moment I do work with some non-binary Aboriginal youngsters, and they have made that distinction between the genders.
Okay.
So they will say, I identify as non-binary, but I'm a titter girl when it comes to cultural reasons.
Oh.
So that's something that's a trend in our communities at the moment.
Because we've had this conversation about how do we incorporate women with other forms of women in the sister circle, because there are differences in our experiences as women, and Laura and I are still debating how we're going to do that.
Thriving.
For sure. I think like what I could say to that as well is there's a lot of complexities involved with that, and a lot of Mum spoke earlier about marriage lines and how the elders choose who you are to marry, and I think a lot of the traditions and a lot of the deep rooted rules around gender is for reproductive purposes, and I'm sure that would also play a role in how we would deal with that on a, I guess in an urban setting it's different because the introduction of IVF and such like that. But back in the day, it was definitely for reproductive purposes.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much for coming.
We completely forgot the question at the beginning, but that's fine.
Oh, yes, we forgot the question at the beginning.
So, like, something that we ask to our guest is, who was the woman that inspired you? Who was the last woman that inspired you?
Would be my grandmother, and then, you know, she taught me a lot. She took me as a 2-week-old baby and nurtured me and taught me well. And then when she passed on, and then it was my mother-in-law, I'd say. My mother-in-law she played a big role in my life, you know, because as I said, I had to follow my husband and went to Angonia to live, and that's where she taught me a lot about law and land, living off the land. She had 11 children. Amazing how she done it. They birthed them under trees, and 11 children. I mean, some people are just have a hospital and flat out having 1 or 2 children nowadays. But women back then would birth 11 children, 12 to 18 children, and they didn't have hospitals then. How amazing that would have been to. And then she would go on to deliver her children and her great-grandchildren, And so, yes, she would be my inspiration, my mother-in-law, Ruby Yulo. Yep.
See, now, when I hear stories like this, it's almost like I'm sensing my past life, and I don't even believe in past life, but I can feel my past life and just seeing how essential these practices are. Because just yesterday, Laura and I were talking about, like, what would you do when you have a baby? And Laura was talking about how she wants a partner to be there. And I said, well, in the Mani tradition, men aren't even around because women are around.
Yep.
But now, because we've kind of cut those traditions away, we expect the men to come into women's business.
Yes, see?
I mean, we can disagree on that a lot because Laura thinks that. But when I hear so, it reminds me of there's certain things that men don't need to be part of.
Yep.
This is why we're bumping heads as well, because we're bringing men into women's business and women are bringing, so it gets a bit complicated. And I can see how some of those tradition practices are so essential.
And I can just add to that once the women have the babies, the men move out of the house. They live outside the house.
Yeah.
And the women the woman would just be able to be the one that looks after all the children. And you'll see a lot of that within our Indigenous communities, that a lot of them don't live in their house. They live outside where they would make fire and, whereas the women would just stay in their house and then look after all the children.
Yeah. I was also taken in by my grandmother. Like, when I was my grandmother, oh my God, like I feel like my soul chose to be born to be her grandchild.
Yes.
If I couldn't be born for her, to be her grandchild, because I don't know what it's like to not be loved because of my grandmother. And it was just a rich experience. And I was saying that I don't even think my mother washed a single nappy of mine because she had those women around her.
Yep.
And I think I would just go into her for the breast, to be honest.
Yes. That's about it.
So and although I've lived a very different life, not really following tradition, but I was born in that circle of women,
that's right,
loving on me like that. So when you say it, it's almost like it's awakening every cell in my body. It's like it's a cellular memory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, a lot of similarities we would have within our cultures.
Yeah.
Our cultural roles.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So Serica was just saying about the excitement in the community when a baby's born. Yeah. So what is that like, Serica?
So when a baby's born in the community, it's like a baby's born to everybody, not just the mother and father.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ceremonies being had. Sometimes ceremony is done for days before a baby's born. And that excitement and that anticipation is one of the most exciting things.
Can you imagine coming into life with everybody waiting for your arrival like that?
Yeah.
That is true love. Like I say that I've been raised by the planet because there's always been somebody ready to take care of me, even when my own mother couldn't.
I know.
You know, so
And I think even today, that's a practice that we still do today.
yeah.
Like, I definitely can say that my mum is not only my mum, and that my aunties I call my mother as well.
yeah.
And in Aboriginal culture, sometimes my aunties will call me mum. I know it's a bit of a foreign thing for Westerners to hear, but my auntie will say, "Hey, like call me mum," because we're on the same level.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's no distinction, even though I'm younger, and I don't like we have that connection where it's like she will call me mum, I'll call her mum. It's hard to explain, but that's something that we do.
Exactly.
But all of my aunties are like my mum as well,
Yeah,
Oh, that's
certainly is.
beautiful.
and they all have a different role to play as
Yeah,
well.
different,
Like
you know.
they all have their own strengths, and they translate that to me. And I think I was blessed to have
Yes.
such amazing aunties growing up that had all different roles and all different
Most
talents.
certainly. Most certainly.
Yeah, and you never feel like you're missing out on anything, that you're lacking anything, because there's always somebody ready and available.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
For sure. And you'll often see in our communities when the mum can't step up, auntie steps up or grandmother steps up to look after the child.
That's exactly right. Most certainly.
So, Aunty Trish, what's next for you? Like, then if you arrive at the...
Gosh, what's next for me? I suppose just to look after myself and stay as fit and healthy as I can, because I have 4 grandchildren, my 1 granddaughter and 3 grandsons. So my responsibility now, I think, is to my granddaughter to be able to make sure that she gets the best, and raise her up to have that cultural knowledge, which is important. Be able to always take our arm to country and play her role too as well. So, because when her mum's not in her life, as you said, that kinship, that we just automatically take that on. Myself and Seri and Rika, my other daughter, my oldest daughter. So we automatically just fill that role. And she loves that, So for me, I think just being that grandmother, I think, and playing that grandmother role and being that strong female and, grandmother in their life. And I think that's where I live my life, around that as well. Still living for my daughters, and my son, but my grandchildren too as well. So, yeah, I love it. I love the role. I believe would be me, in the past tense. That's me. That's my role, and that's how I grew up. Being able to, be able to play that grandmother role is just amazing for me. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing.
That's
Thank
gorgeous.
you.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It was indeed healing in hearing you just recite those stories back to us and telling us and teaching us about your cultures, teaching the nation, whoever's ears finds this podcast, because I think it's important to also, just understand what is the practice of the land that we live in, because it's so rich in itself, yet it's so hidden in a way that, we don't get to access that. Like, people who come here, they don't really get to access that. And I think it was amazing to have this as part of our learning experiences on the podcast. Laura, do you have anything else to add before we close the pod?
No, I just want to say thank you, Aunty Trish and Serika, for sharing with us today, and then I feel so rich because I learned so much more about actually, as Stephanie was saying, the land where I'm living, and what are the traditional practice that I've been operating, and I can see how it's so related and really similar to mine, originally my African culture as well. So it's really good, coming from 2 different continents, but so similar.
But similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then which just stresses the fact that it's nature is hearing those.
It's natural law, as I would say. Natural law.
So yeah,
Natural.
and I think that's part of the healing of us as well. It's just to go back to the roots, just to go back to what life is. Life in itself is a teacher. Nature in itself is a teacher.
That's
but
exactly
we
right.
tend to complicate it by going a little bit too intellectual,
Yeah.
and we lose that essence. Well, thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for coming. We've come to the close of this circle.
I'll just say
Yeah.
one word, yellow. Means not goodbye, but see you later.
See you later indeed. Like, if you've taken anything from this conversation, do let us know in the comment section. If you have any question you like our opinion on, you can email us at thesistercirclepodcast@gmail.com. That's the Sister Circle Podcast@gmail.com. Join us next week in a new circle. Until then, have a great week.
Thank you.